On Friday, they boxed up my desk and showed me the door. No warning, no second chances, just, you're done. But what they didn't expect was that by Monday morning, I'd be walking right back through those same doors, with a surprise they never saw coming. Tell me, friends, have you ever lost a job suddenly, only to have life throw you an unexpected twist right after? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to read it. Today's video is about how I was fired on a Friday and rehired on Monday with the sweetest surprise of all. Stick around, hit subscribe, and let's dive in. It happened on a Friday, the kind of Friday when everyone was ready to wrap up early, grab a drink, and enjoy the weekend. I had just finished finalizing a report, one I'd been working late nights on for weeks, when my manager called me into his office. The tone in his voice told me something was off. He wasn't smiling, wasn't making small talk. He gestured to a chair, and before I could even sit down properly, he dropped the words that knocked the wind out of me. "We're letting you go." I blinked, certain I hadn't heard him right. "Excuse me?" "It's just not working out anymore," he said, his voice flat, rehearsed, like he'd practiced the line in front of a mirror. "Pack up your things. HR will walk you out." Just like that. No warning, no explanation. I sat frozen, my mind racing. 18 months of long hours, fixing problems no one else wanted, saving deadlines at the last minute, and this was my reward? "Can I at least ask why?" I managed to say. He leaned back in his chair, avoiding my eyes. "It's a business decision." That was all. No details, no justification. I walked back to my desk in a daze. Coworkers glanced at me but quickly looked away. Word had already spread. HR showed up with a cardboard box, and within 15 minutes, I was out the door, my career at that company over in a blink. That weekend was one of the longest of my life. I sat at home with my wife, replaying every mistake I might have made. Did I offend someone? Miss something critical? Nothing made sense. But then, late Saturday night, my phone buzzed. It was an email from a client I had worked closely with for months. They'd heard I was gone and were furious. "You were the only reason we stayed with your company," they wrote. "If you're not there, we may take our business elsewhere." I read that email twice, my pulse quickening. For the first time since being fired, I felt a spark of hope. Because maybe, just maybe, my story with this company wasn't finished yet. And as Sunday evening rolled around, another call came in. This time from a number I hadn't expected at all. The head of the company's executive team. The call came just as I was about to head to bed Sunday night. I almost didn't answer. I didn't recognize the number, but something in me said, "Pick it up." "Hello?" I said cautiously. A deep voice replied, formal but direct. "This is Robert from the executive team. Do you have a moment to talk?" My heart skipped. I straightened in my chair. "Of course." He sighed heavily as if the weight of the whole company sat on his shoulders. "I understand you were terminated on Friday." "Yes," I said slowly. "That's correct." "Well," he continued, "I've received several calls since then, one in particular, from your largest client. They're threatening to pull millions in business if you're not on the account." I froze. Millions? No wonder he was calling me. "I'll be honest," Robert said, lowering his voice. "I wasn't aware of your termination until this weekend. It wasn't approved by me, and judging by the fallout, it was a mistake." A mix of anger and relief swirled inside me. A mistake? I thought. Losing my job, being humiliated in front of my peers, walking out with a cardboard box, and now it was just a mistake? But I bit back the anger. This was my chance. "What exactly are you saying?" I asked carefully. He cleared his throat. "I want you back. First thing Monday. Same role, same responsibilities." For a moment, I couldn't speak. Fired on Friday, rehired on Monday. It felt surreal. But as the silence stretched, Robert added something else. Something that changed everything. "And frankly," he said, "given the circumstances, we're considering adjusting your position. The client trusts you. They don't just want you back on the account, they want you leading it." My eyes widened. Leading it? That was a promotion, maybe even a raise. The very thing I'd worked toward, stripped from me days earlier, was now being handed back, along with more. I let out a slow breath, steadying myself. "I'll return Monday," I said. "But I need it in writing. A formal letter confirming my reinstatement, and the new responsibilities you mentioned." Robert chuckled softly, almost impressed. "Smart man, you'll have it by morning." When I hung up the phone, my wife looked at me with raised eyebrows. Who was that? Let's just say, I smiled, Friday's story isn't over. Sleep was nearly impossible that night. My mind spun with the irony. On Friday, they'd shoved me out the door without a second thought. And on Monday, I'd be walking back in, stronger, higher, and with the company's biggest client at my back. But beneath the excitement was something else. Resolve. Because I wasn't just going back for the paycheck or the title. I was going back to prove a point. That loyalty and hard work meant more than politics. That you couldn't erase years of service with a careless decision. And come Monday morning, they were going to see that clearly. Monday morning, I walked through those glass doors with my head held high. Just 2 days earlier, I had shuffled out of the same building, clutching a cardboard box like a man defeated. Now, I carried nothing but confidence, and the knowledge that the company's biggest client was standing firmly behind me. The receptionist nearly dropped her coffee when she saw me. "You're back?" she stammered. I smiled. "Yes, reinstated as of this morning." I didn't need to say more. The surprise on her face was enough. As I walked through the hallways, heads turned. Conversations hushed. People nudged each other, whispering. They'd all seen me escorted out on Friday. To them, I was gone for good. But here I was, striding in like I'd never left. And then I saw him, my manager, the man who had fired me. His eyes went wide, his jaw tightening as if he'd bitten into something sour. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, stepping into my path. "Reporting for work," I said evenly. "Per instruction from the executive team." He scoffed, trying to regain his composure. "That's impossible. I made the decision myself." "Yes," I replied calmly. "And the executives overturned it. Apparently your decision upset a client worth millions." I let the words hang, watching his face pale. He opened his mouth to argue, but just then, Robert, the executive who had called me, appeared from around the corner. "Good morning," he said, his voice carrying authority. He clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Glad to have you back. Let's talk about the new responsibilities we discussed." The look on my manager's face was priceless. Shock, anger, a flicker of fear. He'd thought he had the final say, but now the rug had been pulled out from under him. As Robert led me toward the conference room, whispers followed us like a trail. Colleagues who had avoided my eyes on Friday now looked at me with a mixture of awe and curiosity. Some smiled, some nodded, and one even mouthed, "Welcome back." Inside the conference room, Robert laid it out plainly. "The client insists you lead their account directly. We're restructuring to make that happen. You'll be reporting to me, not to your previous manager." I sat there for a moment, letting the words sink in. Fired on Friday by a man who thought he could erase me. Rehired Monday with a promotion that cut him out of the picture entirely. "Understood," I said, my voice steady. But inside, I was burning with a mix of satisfaction and disbelief. When the meeting ended, I stepped back into the office. My former manager avoided my gaze, his shoulders stiff as he retreated into his office. Meanwhile, coworkers came by my desk, one after another, offering quiet congratulations. "You pulled off a miracle," one whispered. "Not a miracle," I corrected gently. "Just the truth coming out." Because the truth was simple. I hadn't begged to come back. I hadn't clawed for revenge. The company needed me more than I needed them. And that was the sweetest surprise of all. The days that followed were unlike anything I'd experienced before. On Friday, I'd been a discarded employee, humiliated and written off. By Monday afternoon, I was leading the most important account in the company. The shift was immediate. Robert gathered the team in the large conference room and introduced me as the new account lead. "Our client has been very clear," he said. "They want him in charge. Effective immediately, he'll be running point." A ripple of surprise moved through the room. My coworkers clapped politely, some genuinely, some nervously. But I could feel the difference in their eyes. They weren't just seeing me as the guy who'd been fired. They were seeing me as someone the top brass and the client trusted above anyone else. Meanwhile, my former manager sat in the corner, stiff as a board. He didn't say a word, just stared at the table in front of him. For years he had controlled the narrative, decided who stayed and who left, who rose and who fell. But now the power had shifted, and everyone in that room knew it. Once the meeting ended, I got to work. The account was in rough shape, half-finished deliverables, sloppy communication, deadlines hanging by a thread. It didn't take long to see why the client had lost patience. They hadn't just needed someone to run things, they needed competence. They needed accountability. So I rolled up my sleeves. I met with the client directly, assured them that from now on, they'd get nothing less than clarity and results. I sat with the team, dividing responsibilities, setting deadlines, answering questions. Within days, the atmosphere changed. The panic eased. People were working with focus again. And through it all, my former manager sat on the sidelines, watching as I did the job he had once dismissed me from. It wasn't long before the whispers started. In the break room, in the hallways, people talked about how he'd messed up, how his decision had nearly cost the company millions. Some even hinted that his days were numbered. One afternoon, he cornered me near the elevators. His voice was low, bitter. "Don't think this changes anything," he hissed. I met his gaze calmly. "It already has." He didn't respond, just clenched his jaw and walked away. The truth was, I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to humiliate him in front of everyone. The humiliation was already unfolding on its own. Every success I delivered, every satisfied email from the client, every nod of approval from Robert, it all chipped away at his authority until there was nothing left. By the end of the week, Robert called me into his office again. He handed me a formal letter, my reinstatement, my new role, and a pay raise to match the responsibility. "You've earned this," he said simply. I walked out with the letter in hand, my chest lighter than it had been in months. The coworkers who saw me couldn't hide their smiles. "Congratulations," one whispered. Another said, "Funny how things turn around, huh?" And as I sat at my new desk, I realized the irony. The man who had fired me thought he'd buried my career on a Friday. But by Monday, I wasn't just back. I was stronger, higher, and standing on ground he could never reach again. The following Monday, exactly 1 week after I'd been fired, the office felt transformed. Not because the walls had changed or the work was any different, but because of the way people looked at me. Before, I'd been just another dependable employee, steady and quiet, the kind of person others overlooked. Now, after being tossed aside and then called back by the top brass, people saw me differently. They saw someone who had weathered the storm and come out stronger. The whispers that used to sting were gone. In their place were nods of respect, genuine smiles, even pats on the shoulder. One colleague leaned over and said, "You're proof that good work doesn't go unnoticed forever." I smiled, but inside I felt something deeper: vindication. Meanwhile, my former manager kept shrinking into the background. His voice in meetings carried no weight, his attempts to give direction ignored. The decision to fire me had been his, and everyone knew it. Now, that decision was a stain he couldn't wash off. He'd tried to end my career, but instead he had ended his own credibility. As for me, I poured myself into the new role. The client was demanding, yes, but they were also loyal. They wanted results, and I gave them everything I had. Each time their feedback came in, praising the clarity of our updates, the quality of the work, I felt another piece of the humiliation from that Friday slip away. One evening, as I left the office, Daniel, a junior coworker, caught up with me. "I have to say," he admitted, "when they fired you, I thought it was over. But watching you walk back in, leading the biggest account, that gave me hope. It made me think maybe hard work actually does matter." His words stuck with me, because this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about showing others that even when you're wronged, even when people in power try to discard you, the truth can still turn the tide. At home, my wife noticed the difference in me, too. "You look lighter," she said one night at dinner. And she was right. The burden of injustice had been replaced with something far better: pride. But the greatest surprise wasn't the raise or the promotion or even the respect. It was the realization that sometimes being pushed down is the very thing that lifts you higher. If I hadn't been fired, the client might never have spoken up. The executives might never have seen my true value. The storm I thought had ended me had, in fact, cleared the path for something greater. As I sat at my desk later that week, looking at the formal letter of my reinstatement pinned neatly to the wall, I thought back to that Friday afternoon, the sting of being told, "It's over." And I couldn't help but smile, because it wasn't over at all. It was only the beginning. And that, friends, is how I walked out with a cardboard box on Friday, and walked back in with a promotion on Monday. Life has a way of turning upside down when you least expect it. What felt like the end of my career became the start of something better. This story taught me one simple truth. Sometimes the doors that slam in your face are the very ones that push you forward. Being underestimated, being discarded, it hurts. But if you hold your ground, keep your integrity, And let your work speak louder than politics. The tables can turn faster than you think. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join me again here on Office Revenge Tales for the next story.